Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello,
Welcome to
hello.
the homestead on the mount, or the beginnings thereof. I'm outdoors, of course. It's a beautiful. All these mornings up here, that's just absolutely gorgeous. So,
So rough.
for everybody that's where I'm at 8,500 feet on the metric system, about 2,600 meters, and you go up to 2,800 meters just on the mountains here, and peaceful, beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous up here. Really cool in the mornings, maybe 9 Celsius in the 40s, highs in the 21 Celsius, 70, 72 degrees. It's a beautiful place up here. So I'm glad everybody's joining. Hey, Nicholas, good to see you, brother. Good to see you. Absolutely. Do we have a full house here? I think we do. I don't know. So yeah, I've been busy for a couple of weeks, obviously, moving up here, getting all the logistics done, getting everything going, and we're on our way to build. This is a process. It's not an event. It's going to take a little while. We're living in a temporary place here. I have 2 acres here. We have 2 acres here, and just a half a mile down the road, just a few hundred meters, we have 12 more acres that we're going to build a homestead on. So we're real close. If we have to winter over here, we have a place to stay. So I probably won't see my photo gear. Well, actually, that's not true. I will see my photo gear here in a couple of weeks. It's going to be delivered up here. We're going to have a kind of a storage unit put on here, and I'll get my photo gear out. I will have mobile access. I'll have my mobile darkroom and all that, but I don't know how much of that I'm going to be doing because I'm going to be building a house. So we'll see what happens. But let's see if we can get some action going here. How's everybody doing? It's good to see everybody. Actually, it's kind of fun to be back in the groove, if you will, and it's really nice to see everybody going on. Hello, hello, welcome. So let's get my head back in the game here for a second. We have a couple of people that wrote me this week asking me what was up, and I appreciate everybody giving me a warm welcome to get up here and get settled. This has been about 4 years in the making and 20 years in our minds. So we're really happy to be able to do this. So it's a little bit it preoccupies my mind a little bit, but I like to shift gears and get back over into photo if I can, or talking about photo at least, and we'll see how this all unravels. I hope to have a nice place set up here by next year. Hello, Linda. Hello, Jean. Everybody, that's great. So I got an email from Michel. I think it was this morning or last night. I believe he's in Quebec. He's in Canada. So, yeah, he's in the eastern part of Canada. And he was asking about graphic inks for doing oil prints. I did that whole series right before I made this move, making oil prints. And I gave him another resource. Hey, Renato, welcome. A proud Portuguese American. There you go. Wonderful. And Herr Ketterman, greetings. Yes, hello. I'm going to give you this link. So if anybody else is looking for, he said the graphic inks chemical company said they would get a shipment in and then ship a week later. He hadn't seen anything. So I'm gonna post this just for if anybody's looking for ink. I gave him another source for it, and I've never posted this before. And they have a wide variety of inks here too, lithographic inks for oil printing. Oh, and he just wrote back there. Yeah. So let's see. I'm going to post this. It's the Tecache Press in New Mexico in the United States. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but let's post it over here. I'll post right there. So if you're looking for inks, hello, Gavin from Scotland. Welcome. It's good to see everybody. God, that's great. I love to see people come in and have a chat with us, It's nice. So what's going on with you guys? That's that one and another. There was an albumin thing, but we don't have to dig into that right now. What's going on with you guys? What's happening in your world? You want to start a conversation up here? Let me put my, I can't see everybody. Let me enter this full screen. There we go. Perfect. Yes, wonderful. Can I add everybody? All right. All right. I'll switch everybody out as we come through here. What's burning questions on your minds? Anybody have anything for a little bit of excuse my hair blowing in the wind. I shaved my head. My wife shaved my head off before we moved just to get rid of my hair. I like my hair short and tidy. Not so much here. This is getting a little bushy because I haven't been able to do anything, but well, I'll turn into a mountain man, right? That's the idea. Get up here. There's nobody around. Who am I trying to impress, right? So, oh, good. Kirsten has a question about black shellac. Is it a good idea to top use? Okay, on the silver side, that's a good question. He's asking about when you make a glass ambrotype on clear, clear glass ambrotype is what we call them, CGAs, clear glass ambrotypes versus a black glass ambrotype. Clear glass ambrotype, you have a couple of options in finalizing those, putting a black back, right? So if we talk about a direct positive on glass, clear glass, we're talking about putting something black behind it and using that reflected light to look at the very underexposed negative, which presents itself as a positive. Well, in the 19th century, they used to put black velvet behind them, and they'll frame them up, put black velvet behind them. Today, you can use a piece of black aluminum to put on the back of them. You can put black paper. You can use velvet, all those kinds of things. I actually have an ambrotype in my collection from 1876 that they used asphaltum, gilsonite, right? The same stuff we pour on steel to make tin types, bake them in the oven, make tin types. Gilsonite, asphaltum, just like road tar. You dilute that with some mineral spirits or turpentine, and you have a solution that you can pour on the plate, and it blackens. And it is a really, I actually use angel gilding gilsonite. It works really, really well. I thin it down just a little bit. I have a video on my YouTube channel that I've posted a couple of times about doing it. So what he's asking, he calls it black shellac, and that's great. That's fine. This is what I recommend. I recommend that if you're going to pour the asphaltum on the collodion side, I would recommend varnishing that collodion side first. Varnish it, let it dry and cure, then pour your asphaltum on. Then you can peer through the glass and see the image as, as a direct positive, right? As a blackened back direct positive. All the archivists and people will tell you never pour asphaltum directly on collodion. I've done that a lot, and they hold up just fine. In fact, the one from 1876 was poured directly on the collodion side, and it's on a purple glass. It's absolutely beautiful, and it has no problems, right? So I would imagine if you're textbook talking, that wouldn't be appropriate to do for archival reasons. But if you want a nice finish and you don't want to bother with varnishing, try a couple and see what you think. See if they hold up for you. Mine, 10, 12 years now, at least I've done them, over a decade for sure, show no signs of deterioration. I'm maybe in a couple 100 years, I definitely won't be around, so I probably won't care too much. There's no they're not degrading in a decade. And, it's a debate. If you want to mitigate that issue, varnish it, then pour it on the collodion side. If you pour it on the glass side, the non-collodion side, then you're going to definitely have to varnish the image, because now you're just pouring it. That's a very safe way to do it, right, as well. Pour it on the glass side and varnish the collodion side like you'd normally do. And that's a great way to have just one compact thing without an additional piece of material, velvet or paper or tin or aluminum, whatever you might back it with. It's a great solution for that. So that's a great question. top instead of asphaltum. Yeah, maybe you're asking black shellac. Maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but I've tried and I've used black ink. I've used mixed. I put gilsonite in varnish in Sandorak varnish, and have used it that way, which works really well. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can do that. So just keep in mind that you're going to have the archival issue to deal with. That's the only thing. Black glass. What's up, Tin Can?
We're just wondering about black glass, ambrotypes.
Yeah.
So what type of glass or what type of black is it?
Yes, that's a great question. Black glass, probably my absolute favorite. I worked for 15 years. The first 15 years I worked in this process, I almost exclusively used black glass and then, of course, clear glass. But black glass it's called a Cathedral 1009S glass. It's an imperfect, it's like obsidian. It's black all the way through. It's an imperfect roll. It's a lot more expensive than clear glass, obviously. But the beauty about the black glass is what you're trying to do with positives is ambrotypes, is you're using that, and tin types, any positive, you're using that reflected light off the plate to shine back or to reflect back and show you that image. So the darker the substrate is, or the backing is, and the more sheeny or shiny the material is, the better result you're going to get. And black glass, bar ferrotypes or tin types, black glass is by far the one of the best materials to reflect back to you. The sheen, the brilliance, the reflectivity quality of the glass itself, absolutely gorgeous. It's some of the best stuff you can use, really, in my opinion, if you're going to make positives, unless you bake your own ferrotypes, right? You take the steel, pour the gilsonite on, bake them in your oven or a barbecue or whatever you're doing, and make those are equivalent. If they're made well, those are equivalent to the black glass. Alumatypes or aluminum, black aluminum, they're fine. And especially if you don't have anything to compare them with, they're just not quite as brilliant and they don't have that reflective quality. So black glass, number one in my book, if you're going to do direct positives. Clear glass, you can get wonderful results as well too. It's just a matter of, just like I talked about, what kind of material are you going to use to back that? And if you do gilsonite, again, if you do the asphaltum covering and you do it properly, that works. You're basically kind of hybriding, turning it into a ferrotype a little bit, right? You're using that same material as you did baking those ferrotypes. So black glass, clear glass, and ferrotypes are probably the best. Absolutely, you're bitteschön, Karsten. You're no problem on that. So yeah, positives are a really interesting. I've talked about this before, but positives are really interesting because they're easy to make, and people, if you don't have something to compare them with and something shows up on the plate, oh my God, that's wonderful. But as you go through the process and you learn more and more about it, you become more discerning, you become more particular about the quality of them. And as you go through and you improve, look at your first plate and then look at your latest plate and you'll see a huge difference. And then if you can compare your plates with somebody who's really experienced in it, compare those plates. There are so many variables in this, from exposure to chemicals to the substrate to the post-production of varnishing, maintenance and archivability and all that. If these positive plates are done correctly, there's very little that can compare to those. I mean, really, the quality is just outstanding if you get everything right. So the substrate is very critical, but then you move to the chemistry, obviously very critical, and then exposure and the methodology or your technique of going through and making that image, developing everything, all the information that's there, and not overdeveloping, not underdeveloping, hitting that sweet spot and producing all the image without veiling or scumming or fogging, any of those kinds of things, and not underdeveloping. That's just as bad sometimes as overdeveloping. So the exposure has to be on, your technique and development has to be on, your chemistry has to be on, the quality of light is absolutely crucial. This is the best stuff you can use right here, right? This actinic, I'm actually kind of facing north. North is that way for me right now. And this big, blue, beautiful north actinic light. Collodion response, that UV is just, UV up here at 2,700 meters at 8,600 feet above sea level. There's very little atmospheric pollution. So it's very high up here. Exposures up here would be very, very short, fast exposures, or you want to stop down. So all those things combined, you're going to end up with a very, very nice, a very high quality image, right? That's what you're after. So keep all that stuff in mind as you're playing with those positives, that remember those all spinning the plates. You got a bunch of plates spinning at once and you got to keep them all rotating. That's kind of what this is, right? Your light, your chemistry, your optics, your technique, your substrate, even after you've made the image, the post-production, how you varnish, how you treat the image, all those things are really crucial to making a quality image. And, I tell people this, if you're not selling your work, if you're not in a gallery and people aren't coming to buy it, experiment, play with that stuff. If, however, you are in a gallery or you're represented or you're making work or commissioned work or selling portraits, that's where you want to raise the bar quite high, right? Now you're taking money and people are expecting a certain quality, a certain archival quality. So you want to know that what you're doing is proper and that you've experimented enough to know that your technique and your post-production is, and all your materials, your chemistry, all that stuff, what type of varnish you're using, the technique you're using, the materials you're putting on the plate or backing the plate with, all that stuff is crucial and critical. If you start accepting money for plates, I think you need to raise the bar a little bit. If you're playing in this and just having fun, experiment and have a good time with it, and find out. I spent years just playing with it and finding out what works and what doesn't. So be aware of that. Let's see. Are there things to remember you have experienced when you take your equipment darkroom? Oh, so Jan, good to see you, brother. I hope you're there somewhere. Yeah, you are. Jan's asking, are there things to remember you have experienced with when you take your equipment darkroom outside for shooting? That's a great question. And I always say this to people. When you're in a studio environment, whether you're using continuous light or strobes or even natural window light, when you're in that environment, you got your little bubble you're working in, and it's great to do that, to get this process down, to get your methodology and your technique down. It's really good to work in a controlled environment. In fact, I recommend people set up a statue head or a vase or glass bottles or something. Just leave it there and photograph it over and over and over again until you get all that stuff down. The minute you pack up and go outside and go out into the environment and you try to start working, you're going to say, I don't know anything about this process. What am I doing? Nothing's working, right? So the things, to address Jan's question, the things I would really pay attention to, number one, exposure is going to be very, very different, because now you've got this full UV light coming in, especially on a clear day. And depending on your elevation and your pollution in the air and all that, you're going to be much, much higher regardless. Even in cities at low elevations, your exposure is going to be much, much faster. So the first thing I see people do when they go outside is totally overexpose their images, totally overexpose them. The second thing to concern yourself with is the temperature. Maintaining the temperature of your chemicals, whether it's hot or cold, mostly hot. Collodion loves the more cool stuff, but you've got to maintain that either with coolers, with some source of keeping those chemicals within the range of working temperature. The biggest thing is leaving your silver bath out exposed to the heat. So you first get there and you set up, you pour your silver bath in your tank. You know, it's 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that. But you're working in 35 Celsius, 38 Celsius, something like that, in the 80s or 90s Fahrenheit. You're going to, over an hour or two, you're going to raise the temperature of that bath. And then you're going to start seeing different effects. You're going to start seeing whether you're leaving your plate in the bath too long, whether it's hot, you start fogging, you start veiling, you start all those things. As your developer heats up, the same thing. So it's really critical to remember, maybe your optics need to change. Maybe you need a water house stop, or you stop your lens down when you go outside and work in the UV and pay attention to exposure. And then secondly, pay attention to the temperature of your chemicals. Really critical, really crucial. And I remember the first time I went out mobile and tried to make photographs. I had a 1990 Dodge Caravan vehicle that I converted the back to a dark room. And I was driving around the city and I'd set up, and everything seemed like 10 times the work. Everything seemed like it was just wobbling right on the balance. It's a very different work environment after you work in your nice little studio or your little space that you're used to, and everything's controlled, temperature and light and all that stuff. And you get out there and you start working, it's overwhelming. So I would recommend, the third thing I would recommend is that you not have other people, like, don't offer to go out and do portraits for the first time. Go out and do a landscape scene that nobody's going to bother you, that you have time to work with and figure this technique out, figure your temperature out, figure your optics and exposure out, and don't get under pressure. Under pressure in a new environment, sometimes even in the studio, can be overwhelming, especially outdoors. It's going to feel like, if you've never made images, wet collodion images outdoors, you go out the first time, it's going to feel like you don't even know the process in a weird way. So those are kind of the pieces of advice that I would give to that. 20 degrees, Nicholas. 20 degrees, yes. 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit would be the, collodion just loves you for that. If you stay within a couple of degrees of that, collodion just loves you. I think I say in my book, if you go over about 24 degrees Celsius, get in the high 70s or the low 80s Fahrenheit, you might start seeing some changes. Heat exacerbates or speeds everything up molecularly, on the molecular level. Organic chemistry, right? We've talked a lot about. So heat speeds everything up. So you start having problems. You're maintaining this window of temperature for these chemicals, that you're making your exposure, the proper time of exposure, the proper temperature of the developer, and then the technique, how long you go. When we do 15 seconds, we want to see those highlights in 3 or 4 seconds. Colder weather, it might take 4 or 5 seconds. Midtones, 7, 8 seconds. And the shadow starting coming in at 10 or 12 seconds. And you start arresting, you're pouring water or running water on it at around 15 seconds. If you stay with that and change your exposure and never alter your methodology, never change your technique, always change your exposure, keep everything the same. Temperature of chemicals, the temperature of pouring the developer on the plate and running that through, and watch for those. You'll know. People say, well, just run a test strip. Yeah, you can do that. You can just pull your slide out and do a second or two each, and that's great. The problem is, a lot of times you can't line up what you're most interested in for the proper exposure. I say waste a couple of plates. Go through and get your technique down so you can go out to a scene and you've made enough plates that you can say, with my collodion looking like this, and my developer and my silver bath with this pH and this silver content, I'm going to make this scene for 6 seconds. Maybe 6 seconds is a second or two over or under, but after that first plate, you'll know immediately, because you know those highlights, those midtones, and those shadows. And experience is the best teacher by far. A workshop will help you a lot, but I guarantee you teach this process to yourself. I mean, I've taught a lot of people this process, and I think I've helped a lot of people, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that teach themselves this process. Nobody can teach you this. You need to go out and get it. You can learn safety, you can learn some general rules, you can learn some techniques, But at the end of the day, it's you pouring plates, making exposures, and working on your technique. And that's what I always say too. Really critical. If you're serious about working in the process, again, if you're tinkering around, take all this with a grain of salt, right? It's just kind of fun. You're just tinkering around. You're not going to really get that serious about it. You can do whatever you want. Buy kits, do whatever you do. Just do the easiest route you want. Don't drill down and try to get that image just perfect. You're satisfied with that. But if you're serious about it, the other component to that experience is I highly recommend people making their own chemistry, because that's part of getting that experience, is learning. I always say it's my heart, how I feel, my optics, the light, and the chemistry. And if I get all those working together and I'm intimately aware of how I made my chemistry, how much salt this collodion has in it, what the pH and the silver content in my silver bath, how my developers tweak, my temperature, all that stuff I'm directly involved with, really helps me improve the quality of my image, or getting closer to that quicker, getting closer to the quality of image that I desire, whether it's a negative or a positive. Negatives are a little more difficult, and I really recommend using chemistry to get you closer to making negatives better. That change in the chemistry will help a little bit. People always ask me, can I make negatives with positive chemistry? Yep, you can. Absolutely. But the negative chemistry tweaks will help you get closer to that good, perfect negative that you want to make prints, just absolutely stunning prints with, right? And again, this is, your mileage may vary. This is not gospel. This is not, this is the law. No, not at all. There's such a wide gap here, guys. I mean, this is just, to come on and start ranting about what collodion, it's just, most of it is my opinion to start with, right? And then secondly, everybody works in different environments with different products, with different optics, after a different look and feel. So I try to speak in general guidelines. And then if we want to drill down and get a little tighter on stuff, I can offer a little bit of help there just to get you going. But those are the things that have the most impact when you're working outdoors for the first time, when you're trying to perfect your images or make the highest quality image you can, the experience, mixing your own chemistry, paying attention, taking copious notes, taking notes every, what was the temperature and humidity today? How long was my exposure? Documenting those plates. And really, it doesn't take that long. If you're serious about making plates, it doesn't take that long to dial this in. And especially if you're working seasonally, like I'm going to add one more thing to Jan's question about going outside. Think about this. As we move outdoors and we make photographs out in this beautiful UV light, which collodion was made for, right? I mean, collodion didn't know electricity or bulbs or flashes or anything back in the day. So as we move out in this beautiful light, here's the earth spinning and rotating, right? This is seasonal and this is hourly. So as we spin around and as we rotate in the seasons, the best season, of course, for the most light would be in the northern hemisphere would be June, July, and August. In the southern hemisphere would probably be November, December, January, right? We know how that works. So that's the tilting on the axis. Now we're rotating, right? The hourly stuff. So as the sun comes up in the summertime, it comes right overhead. In the wintertime, it goes low and crosses over the horizon. Keep in mind, when you go outdoors, and I always say 10 a.m. to 1400 hours or 2 p.m. That's your kind of golden window in the wet plate process for light. Pretty much any time of year, but especially in the spring and summer and fall, I guess you could say. But keep in mind, you're out there. This isn't a click, click, click process. You're out there. You have to set up. You have to pour plates. You have to sensitize them, load them up, make sure everything's right. So you're between 5 and 10 minutes a plate usually. So once you get set up and you have that scene and you make an exposure and it's over or under, you go to pour another plate, that light's going to change a little bit. You're moving. It's a moving target. Your light's a moving target, right? When you're outdoors. And also, guess what else you have to deal with? Clouds. Sometimes a cloud will, I don't know how many times I've got a scene set up and I'm there with the plate and I'm ready to expose it. Oh my God, here comes a cloud. Just covers my whole scene. Now I got to wait. Because that exposure, and I'm not going to guess because then I'm guessing again on the exposure. So just keep in mind, be flexible, making photographs. You might in your studio make 10 plates in a day. If you're going and you're really hyped up and all your stuff's going, 5 or 10 plates, let's say. In the field, you might make 2 or 3 if you're lucky. And some people would say, no, I make 10 out in the field, and that's fine. I'm just saying, if you're first going out, it's going to be a very different experience. And even if you're experienced and you're going out, you can run into some very unique situations that you have zero control over. So you've got to let those, I'm a little bit OCD and I've got to let those control issues go a little bit when I get outdoors, because what I'm after, honestly, when I go outdoors, and I have a specific, I'm pretty goal driven. So when I have a specific goal in mind, I've been to that scene before. I know what the light looks like in May and June. And I know what exposure about I'm at with a clear sky. I go out, what I'm after on that, go out for a 2-hour drive to get to that scene, pack all my stuff up. I have 10 plates prepped for negatives. What I hope to do is get 2 plates out of that scene. That's it. That's all I'm hoping for. And so if I break a plate, if I scratch a plate, if my exposure's off, if I have a bad pour, if I don't get my development technique right, I'm looking for 2 plates of that scene in a full day, right? 4 hours driving, setting up, prepping, all that stuff. So my expectations are very high for the quality of plate, but very low for the quantity of the plates. So it's a quality quantity issue. I think one of the beautiful things about wet plate is that you go for quality, not quantity. If you want quantity, put a roll of film in, get you a CF card and get you a digital camera kind of thing, right? We're going for the quality of the image, not the quantity of the image. But in practice, you might want to, look at quantity as well for experience. So the more each plate you make, like I said earlier, if you've been making plates in wet collodion for a while, grab your first plate out and look at the last plate you made. Compare those. You're going to say, oh my God, I was showing people this plate. You're going to have a different experience with that. So do you only take 10 plates with you, Nicholas? My box holds 15 plates. Usually I'll take between 10 and 15 plates. Yeah, depending on the size and depending on the time of year. Sometimes I'll only have an hour or 2 to make photographs. So I take those extra plates in case like I said, the variables that I have are breaking the glass, exposures are off, development technique is off, peeling and lifting, and rarely do I ever have that happen. But the minute I say, oh, I can get away with 5 plates, I'll have 4 of them have something wrong with them, right? It's just the gamble. And sometimes I go out and boom, I come back with, 4 perfect plates and I have 6 left and I'm finished with that scene and I'm done. I've got my negative or my positive, whatever I'm doing. So I just have to take enough to ensure that, again, 2 plates is usually what I'm after. Oh, the Levi's job was a positive. Yeah, I did. Nicholas talking about a few years ago here in Colorado, down south in the Gunnison Ranch, 7-Eleven Ranch. The Levi's vintage clothing line asked me to go down and make wet collodion plates for their vintage clothing line, a commercial gig, right? So the contract was for 10 whole plate tintypes. I ended up doing 13 and I probably took 40 plates with me, right? Because I just tossed those. Those are, and I had issues down there. It was freezing cold. the plates would get scratched. The wash tray would ice up. The plates would scratch the collodion off. So I made 13 plates total, and I took I took a stack, that because there's no prep to that. They're just put them in your box. When you're talking about making negatives, you're talking about cutting glass, deburring, cleaning, albuminizing, all that stuff to prep them up. And then, you just don't shoot them that. Yeah, but Dale says, isn't poor development technique part of art? Yeah, it can be part of artistic vision. It's a good way to cover it up. And, I got to be honest. Sometimes I've seen people's development techniques really enhance the photograph. It's unintended, right? It's not driven. You didn't know that. Sally Mann has a great quote. Sally Mann's great. She's a wonderful person. I've talked to her a few times, and we've had conversations about, the wet plate collodion world, and she's a great person. But she has a saying. She says, every time I pour a plate, I pray for the angels of serendipity to show up. Just the angels of chance to see what it brings. And we know this. We all have this, right? We all have this love of, wow, what's this plate going to look like? 20 years into this game, I still pour a plate and say, wow, I wonder what this plate's going to look like. I think I have a pretty good idea, but sometimes I'm surprised, right? I mean, sometimes it's really bad and it's like, get out of here. And sometimes, wow, I can live with that. That's kind of neat. But yeah, to Dale's point, I don't think you want to ride that artistic vision thing too much. Great work, but I remember it being very tough. Yes, thank you, Nicholas. That was a tough gig. Oh, yes, a perfect plate. Yes. So, Jan just said, yes, often it's too perfect of a plate. Creative license. Yeah, you can say that too, Dale. Here's the thing. Because I'm an educator in this process and have been for a long time, my goal when I educate people, and I always throw a caveat in here, but my goal is to say, we're trying to get you to the point where you know how to make the perfect plate or start you on that journey, right? Again, it's up to them, experience, time, effort, all that stuff. But what I'm saying is a lot of times we do, just like I said, we do love this process because of that serendipity quality, that happy chance, like something shows up. Sometimes it's really bad, like I said, and sometimes it's really interesting. So you don't get that with film. You surely don't get it with digital. So there's this, I don't care how long you've been doing this or how many plates you've made or how much you know about it. You have to admit there's still this quality that, it's up to the collodion gods, if you will, kind of thing. There's that little bit of percentage chance that something cool is going to happen or something really terrible is going to happen. So yeah, call me a smarta. No, it's true, Dale. You're right about that. People do, everybody's seen the work, right? Everybody's seen people go out too soon with the process on too big of a project and really, it's tough. I cringe for him. I feel bad for him. It's like, you went out too soon. You didn't have enough knowledge about that. And you can't use that creative license to cover up the fog and the veiling and the exposure and the development problems. You can't, it doesn't work like that. Maybe Sally Mann can get away with it. And it's so funny. One more Sally Mann little story here. I was talking to her once and I said, she was asking about getting on the collodion forum board. And then I said, hey, do you have my book? And this was years ago. And she said, no, I just saw that. And I said, I'll send you a book. And she said, oh, I'd love to have one, but I've got a question. Will it make me too good at this process? I thought that was an interesting question. So, it is about vision. So you can't always, you can't always say that we're after the perfect plate. If we're after the perfect plate, if that's all you're after, I would probably recommend you go dry plate or film or even digital or something, right? If you're after that. So be open to that quality of saying, let's see what happens, At least, even if you're really experienced and you really know what you want, leave that little bit open for chance and see what happens. Because man, sometimes, man, I'm telling you, I've been gifted some really cool stuff on plates before that was totally unintended, didn't know it was going to show up, and worked really well. Artifact can only be called creative when it can be duplicated on demand. I would say there's a lot of truth to that, Dale. He's saying that, and I totally agree with this. And this is kind of the philosophy and methodology that I try to teach. I try to teach people the proper way, the technique to start on the path to get plates that are just really clean, immaculate, artifact technique problem free. And then if you want organic material on the plate, if you want to underexpose or overexpose, if you want, whatever artifacts you're after on the plate, you know how to put them on there. It's really interesting. I don't get to go on, look at technical problems on Facebook as often now, but I was just on there yesterday or day before, and somebody had a plate up there. And immediately before they even asked the questions, you could see at the top of the plate, as the image was, a big white streaking down technique or artifact. And right off the bat, you know it's oyster stains or organic material. And you know the top of the plate would be the bottom of the plate, right? So I can tell that I would say that their plate holder was filthy or full of silver and material from previous plates. And as they turned it around, the stuff started running down and created this big organic material stuff. And immediately I saw in the comments, people are talking about developer and silver bath and those kinds of things. And it has not had nothing to do with that. I didn't have time to chime in or do any of that, but I try to limit my stuff to saying, if you have my book, and most people here and do, or, it's all in there. It's you watch the videos, I recreate artifacts in the videos. I show you all that stuff, the troubleshooting stuff, the most common ones. And so, over the year after year after year, when I had the collodion forum board up, the same questions would come through time after time after time. And it's, I often thought about creating kind of a database where people could go, type the question in, and find the correct answer. And I was hoping the collodion forum board would do that. But it's still, you have new people coming in all the time. They'll run into the same problems with artifacts and problems. And there should be enough people out there now to know. You can just look at that plate and see, man, that's your filthy plate holder. That's organic material intermixing with that, and be able to hit that right off the bat. Because when you send people, new people coming into the process having technical problems, when you send them down the road of developer or silver bath, what happens is they start creating more problems. It's a feedback loop. They just get deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's really important. And I'm not saying everyone wants to be an educator or offer advice, but if you see stuff like that on boards, offer the proper, correct advice if you know it. Most people should know it by now. Those are simple. Those are really simple problems to resolve. So, Peter, hey, Quinn, nice to see you on the new homestead. Thank you. Restrainers, can you chat a bit about the purpose and how they work? Absolutely, Peter. Welcome. Thank you for coming in. And yes, welcome to the Rocky Mountains, 2,600 feet above sea level if you're on metric, 8,500 if you're on feet. It's beautiful. Mount Pisag is right here behind me. That's the internet feed I'm shooting off of. It's beautiful and quiet. There's a big forest right here. It's absolutely gorgeous. So thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm so happy to be out of the city. I am so over the whole COVID thing, the city, the people. I'm so over that. Anyway, thank you. Yes, I'll talk about restrainers. So Peter's asking, what's the function? What is a restrainer first? The restrainer is in your developer, right? So you develop plates. That's your developer. You have iron, you have acid, you have water, and some alcohol. And I'll talk about each one of those briefly, but I'll concentrate on the restrainer. The iron is the reducer. That's what we call the reducer. That's what brings the silver halogens, the silver iodide, silver bromide, to the pure metallic state of silver. It starts in the exposure process, but it's finalized with the iron. So we call that the reducer. Just like you chop up an onion and throw it in a pan with some butter, you reduce that down, or you put sugar in a pan, you reduce that sugar down. The iron reduces those halogens into pure metallic silver. The acid is the restrainer. Now, the water's the carrier, and the alcohol is for flow, or allowing everything to cover the plate. But the restrainer, the acid, there are two types of restrainers. There's a chemical and organic. I like the chemical just for the simple fact it's more effective, stronger, usually more effective, quicker. I shouldn't say more effective. It's a faster acting. And an organic restrainer would be like a honey, sugar, beer, molasses, things like that. That works on the principle of crowding the space out. Chemically, it works on a little different principle. But what does it do? What does the restrainer do? The restrainer, when you pour that iron onto the plate, you have the entire plate covered with silver. So everything on that plate is up for reducing all that silver down to pure metallic state of silver, right? So why doesn't it, when you pour that iron on, why doesn't the entire plate just go silver, white silver? Why doesn't it do that? Well, because you have restrainer in there, just like film. We had restrainer when we developed film too, right? So the restrainer allows you time to reduce the highlights, the midtones, and then it goes to the void areas without developing or reducing the entire plate. What happens when you don't have enough restrainer? Your temperature's too hot, things like that. That's when you get that veil or scumming on the plate where you can run a cotton ball over it and you see underneath there's your image. You've developed that unexposed silver. That's what veiling or scumming is. So the restrainer allows you to develop the exposed areas on the image and leave the rest alone. Where does the rest go? Well, after you develop and you arrest development with water, you put it in your fix. So the fix removes all the unexposed silver and presents the image to you. That's kind of the physics and chemistry behind that. So if you have restrainer problems, they're gonna present themselves in various ways. One, you don't physically have enough restrainer in your developer for the conditions you're working in, and they're kind of both the same, I guess. So you don't have enough restrainer, so you're gonna develop that unexposed silver. And two, if your developer was working great in this environment, now you're outdoors and it's 30 degrees Celsius or 80 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever, your chemistry heats up, everything's heated up. You don't have enough restrainer. You need more restrainer in that developer to hold back that development so you can hit the highlights, the midtones, and then off into the void. So those are the things that restrainer I see big problems with a lot of times in the summertime. People will present a plate. What's wrong with it? It's all veiled, right? They can wipe that stuff off under some water with a cotton ball if they knew that. If it doesn't wipe off, if you have that veiling, I call it fogging at that point. If the fogging doesn't wipe off, that means you have a light leak or your silver bath is off on the pH. So light leak or a silver bath problem if that doesn't wipe off. If it wipes off, that's a restrainer problem. You need to up your restrainer. Or if you don't up your restrainer, you need to cut the concentration of your developer by 25 or 50%, something like that, just with distilled water. That will soften that up so you don't have that radical, you develop all the free silver on the plate. You don't want to develop all this free silver on the plate. You just want where your light struck the plate down to the void area and then remove that unexposed silver with the fix. So good question there, Peter. That's a good one. Let's see, what else do we have? They're good questions. I like them. Really good questions. Absolutely. You're very welcome. Boguslaw, hello. Welcome, man. Welcome. What do you think, Quinn, about color dyes to collodion emulsion make it more apparent? Yes. In fact, God, I wish I had the resource for this. 19th century, that he's talking about dyeing the emulsion. Well, I call it emulsion. I know it's not really emulsion, but talking about dyeing the collodion. And they did this in the 19th century. Pink, purple, blues, really popular. The problem with it, though, is if you use the wrong type of dye, you probably just cost yourself, 60, 70 euros or whatever, $80 or whatever worth of, it depends on how much you use. I would say experiment with it first. And in the 19th century, I think you could go to Google Books and find the book on dyeing collodion, and it's from the 19th century. It's the primary literature. I have never done that myself personally. I've never tried that. One of the very few things I haven't tried. I read about it years ago. I thought it was interesting. And then I looked up some photographs, and a couple of them were interesting. Some of them were overdone. I felt like it was more like pastel coloring tintypes. I have mixed emotions about that stuff. I guess I don't mind slight stuff, but some of those things are really gaudy, and the color can really, the reason, I wasn't even much of a color photographer in film. I was basically black and white. I was a photojournalist, but back in the day when we used film and we shot about 20, 30 rolls of film a day and developed a process, printed all that stuff up. So I was never a real big fan of color because I was never good at it. I always felt like I concentrate on color rather than the image. And one person that I really respect for color is Eggleston, right? William Eggleston, if you don't know him, look him up. He really introduced and brought into MoMA this idea of color and how that works. And that's a kind of a conceptual, arty farty conversation to have. But yes, Boguslav, you should try that. And if you do, please come back and show us some of your results. I don't know anyone that's had any success with it to this point. And I've only known a couple of people over the year that's tried it. And if I remember correctly, the assumption that we came to was the quality of the dye. That's, there's so many moving parts in that one compound or an addition of a chemical that the process doesn't like, it's off, right? It just doesn't take the silver, doesn't process right, doesn't whatever. There's a whole bunch of things. Let me move over here in the shade a little bit. This sun is hot.
Wait.
And move this over just a little bit. See what I mean by the earth is rotating, so I have to go with, there we go. There's still a nice scene behind me, right? Rock outcroppings, a nice big ponderosa pine. Oh, nice breeze. It feels so good. Oh, chemical organic.
It's old Polish book about organic chemicals in photographic process. It's,
beautiful.
Some recipe to use color dyers to collodion process. I will be try.
Good.
I sent some message how it works.
Do it and come back on a show and share what you learned. That's great. Yeah.
So for me, it's very important to receive details with
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
It's especially in landscape photography.
Sure, absolutely.
In collodion, it's almost incredible to receive the clouds.
No.
Kind of exposure, and I will be trying to make emulsion much faster and much panchromatic.
Yes, exactly. You're right about that. That's well said. Perfect. He's talking about, I could do a landscape of the forest here, all the trees over here, and the sky there, and the mountains in the back. The mountains would capture just a little bit, but the sky would be completely blown out. Why is that? Massive UV. I mean, just completely overexposed. So he's talking about, Boguslav's talking about widening that range, panochromatic, making that wider to take in shorter exposures faster, those kinds of things, and capturing that. Back in the day, and what I've noticed is if I use a modern lens, UV coated, slightly UV coated, I can capture clouds with collodion with a modern lens. Not with an uncoated old vintage lens, impossible. But back in the day, before those modern lenses, they'd make two plates, is expose one for the clouds and one for the landscape, and put them together. So you can see Legre's and there's all kinds of experiences out there.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I encourage people, he brings up a great point. I encourage people to read at the turn of the 20th century and right up into the 40s and 50s and maybe even 1960s. There are great chemical books out there that delve into incredible stuff. I have that Kodak Life series books from the 1960s, and that's where I found Joel Snyder, the guy that was working in wet collodion daguerreotyping in the 60s, working for the Smithsonian, making negatives and positives and daguerreotypes. And it's the first time that I had a conversation with a person that, because people said, man, Quinn, you're obsessed about the history of this modern movement. And I said, yeah, I'm kind of obsessed. I want to know the truth about how this was revived or how this started again. And people that made claims that they started it and they did this and they did that, when I started looking into it, it never went away. Scientists were using wet collodion up into the 50s, right? Using it for wet collodion negatives because the grain it's virtually grainless. And then you get into the 60s and there's Joel Snyder making portraits and things for the Smithsonian in the process. And in the 70s, I know a couple of guys that worked in the 70s, and Dale, he just chimed in there. Dale Wilson in Canada, he knows this in Canada and some of the provinces in Canada, especially Nova Scotia and on the eastern side there, coming from Europe. This never went away. Nobody can make those claims, and I think it's really important for us as modern users of the process and dabblers in the process to know the history of it, right? It's kind of like knowing your family history or your grandparents. Kind of nice to know who they were, what they did, kind of informs you a little bit about who you are. And I think it's the same with the history of photography. I think it's important not to convolute or conflate that, these people in the 1990s or 1980s revived this process. No, it's not true. It's been going on. I mean, maybe people before that weren't making art photographs or Civil War reenactment photographs or whatever. Maybe they were scientists and process historians and people like that were dabbling in it. I know. Look up Joel Snyder. He's at the University of Chicago. I talked to him years ago about it. And I think it's great. It's important. And it's great information to have our facts straight and be factual about the history of this. Because you know what, guys? We're living in and have been living in a change in the history of photography. This will be documented in 100 years. I don't think we're going to last 100 years, but let's just say hypothetically, in 100 years, if we were to last 100 years, they would talk about this modern revival of these processes in this 20th and 21st century. No doubt about it. So it's important that we have, some information left behind for them to gather that's factual, that's accurate. And the only claim that I've ever really made with it is when I moved to Europe in 2006, there was one old boy in the center of London I think his name was McKenna, if I'm not mistaken, that was an American Civil War reenactor, if you can believe that. And he worked in wet collodion, an older gentleman, never met him, any of that. But he was the only one in Europe that I knew at that time working in the wet collodion process. So when I moved to Germany in 2006, and I started teaching in the beginning of 2007, and I taught all over Eastern and Western Europe, the only claim that I say is I helped it reintroduce this process to Europe, right? And it was a European process, Archer, Legray, whomever you want to talk about. Archer's credited with it because he's the one that published the first working recipe in The Chemist in 1851. Photography came from Europe. Yeah, there's an old saying about here in America, in Ohio, Steubenville, Ohio, old boy in 1856, 57, that says he invented the tintype. He said, she said, all I know is that when I went to Europe in 2006, there was one person on that continent that I knew of working in the process. Could there be more? Maybe. I've never heard any of them. And everywhere I went to teach, nobody was working in the process at the time. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And I didn't do it for fame or glory or anything like that. I did it because I really do love this process. And as an artist, it gives you a whole new palette to work from. I mean, it's endless. It's beautiful. And you'll spend your entire life working at it if you fall in love with it like I did. I mean, I'm 20 years into it and I'm just like, I'm still higher than a kite pouring plates, not off the ether, off the off the result in the wonderful process that it has. So at the end of the day, I'm just saying it's important that we document the history facts. And I recommend people making notes and preserving, publish some things, right? Get in articles. So, because in the future, people are going to look back and say, what happened there? Why was it? Here's right in the middle of this digital craze. You know, here's this, just like in every step of the history of photography, you're going to have this movement and then you're going to have this counter come around, right? That's what's going to happen. You're going to have a movement and then you're going to have a counter to that movement, right? Pictorialists, F64, you know, on and on and on and on. It's just a response. And people especially historians in hey Dale, people in photography want to know the factual history of it. They don't want made up. They don't want people, you know, making things up about it. They want the facts, and we want to give them the facts, and we just want to be accurate about it. This isn't about ego. This isn't about anything else. We just want the facts of what happened, when it happened, and how it happened. And I love it. There's a big part of me that the history of photography. I read academic papers. Well, I used to till the last month or two. I'd read a couple of academic papers on the history of photography every week. I loved it. It's fascinating. I'm knee deep in this stuff. I'm preoccupied. I'm obsessed with it. I can't, you know, it's like heroin to me. I can't get it out of my system. So I just want to know what I'm reading is factual. And there's been a lot of stuff. I have to admit, I think I've said this before. I've tried to get every scrap of primary literature on this process from the 19th and early 20th century that I can. And I have a huge library of it. I'll print it out, or I bought the books or whatever it is. And I've actually ran into a couple of times authors putting mistakes in their recipes and their techniques to throw people off. And I found that fascinating. And when I was teaching in Europe, and I taught a lot in Europe. I taught a lot of courses in Europe, all over Eastern and Western Europe. I'd often have, and this mostly happened in France and some in Spain as well. I'd have people come up to me after workshop day or after the workshop and say, Quinn, this is amazing. And I said, I'm glad you like it. That's great. No, this is amazing. You give everything out. You don't hold anything back. I said, well, yeah, that's the idea. I'm an educator. That's what I do. I want you to have the best chance at success at this process. Say, but this doesn't work like that here. And I'm like, what? And the first time I heard this, it blew my mind. I said, it doesn't work like that here. And I said, what do you mean? So there will be instructors, professors, teachers that will purposely hold back information or misguide you just a little bit. And the first thing that came to my mind was, the ego. They're afraid of competition. If someone gets, and I'm exactly the opposite. I want people, if I can help somebody learn this and then they can teach me something later on to make me better, that's what I want, right? People get so wrapped up. Nobody cares if you make photographs. Let's get that out there. No, they couldn't care less. Anyone in the world couldn't care less if I made another photograph in my life. Don't care about it, right? Let's be honest. They're not opposed to it, but they couldn't care less if I didn't.
That's not
so
true.
The bottom line is that you need to make photographs for yourself. Say that?
That is not true. I really
the
like
bottom line is I believe.
I would love to know what you're going to.
Are you on? Somebody on? Oh, say it, Nicholas. Go.
I actually say it's not true. I love to know what else you're going to do. You know, I love your last series, and I'm actually very curious to see whether whether being in the Rockies will influence you to do something completely different or not.
Yeah, it will. No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Nicholas. I do appreciate that. I know what you're saying. I guess I should expand that comment and clarify it. What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, nobody's going to lose anything if I don't make a photograph. But I appreciate people who would like to see, or maybe even look forward to seeing what I do next, or if I do anything, and it would be a gain. But what I'm saying, nobody would lose anything. And what I'm saying is people get in their minds when they're teaching a process, and it's not just wet collodion, anything, that they're challenged by somebody that will take away from their importance of themselves. It's just kind of an ego thing, I guess. I appreciate what you're saying. And I would like to think that if I make another body of work, that if I do something up here in the mountains, that I do something different and unique, that people would enjoy that. And I would greatly appreciate that. But at the end of the day, if I never did that, no one would lose anything. And I think people get in their heads, they get a little bit full of themselves sometimes, and they think, oh, I got to make work. They're waiting for my work. They care about my work, and I got to do this and I got to do that. And you know, there was a saying I read the other day. In our 20s, we cared about what people thought of us or said about us. In our 40s, we didn't care. In our 60s, we realized that they never even thought anything about us. So it's kind of that kind of methodology going through. So, well, I appreciate that, Nicholas. I do too. Jan says, when you use your silver bath, did the pH go up or down? That's a very good technical question, Jan. When you look at silver nitrate, it's slightly acidic. That's why your bath usually ends up with deionized or distilled water. That's why your bath usually ends up around pH 4 when you first mix it. So your silver bath is slightly acidic. It's very corrosive, but slightly acidic. And as you use it, it will become more alkaline or more basic, meaning that sometimes your bath will tick on the scale, the pH scale, up to 4 to 5, and hopefully you never get to 6. But that's why sometimes you need to acidify your bath. Positives like a slightly acidic bath, negatives like a slightly alkaline or basic bath. The reason for that is, and if you understand, if you look into pH or power of hydrogen, parts of hydrogen, you'll understand the process of that uptake, that conversion, that double decomposition in the silver bath. That process, depending on the pH level, will put more silver or less silver on the plate. You want a little bit of silver on the plate for positives. You're just going to use it. It's a very thin negative, and you're going to reflect light off of that with something black behind it. And negatives, you want denser silver, more silver. You're going to transmit light through that plate onto a piece of paper. So usually. So your bath will tick up slightly in pH if you maintain it. If you aerate it and filter it and take care of it, you might never see it shift from pH 4. You might. I've had baths go at pH 4 for positives for, years, literally a couple, 2-3 years. But then sometimes, just depending on the environment or whatever, it'll tick up to 4.5 or 5, and I'll start seeing that. Plates will get a little dull, won't be contrasty, have a little bit, just slight stuff going on, a little too much silver. So that's a good question though. And this is what I recommend. If your bath is pH 5 and you're not doing negatives, and again, too, the higher your pH number is, the more silver you're going to suck out of your bath, right? You're going to put your hydrometer in there and float it. It was 8.8%. Now it's 8%. You're going to use more silver. It's going to use up that silver in the bath. So to bring that pH down, to make it slightly more acidic, I say this: for every liter of silver nitrate, I put 10 drops of 70% or stronger nitric acid. It's usually 70 to 80% nitric acid. Why do I use nitric acid and not glacial acetic acid? The old literature says you can use glacial acetic acid, and you can. I use nitric acid because that's what the silver bath is made with: silver, sulfuric acid, nitric acid. That's what those crystals actually are. So it stays in line, less contamination, the cleaner stuff you can get, blah, blah, blah. It all helps. Your silver bath, you need to pay close attention to and take really good care of. So that's how you drop the, make it more slightly acidic. And I've had people ask, well, what if my bath is pH 2? You're probably okay around pH 2.5 to 3. It's great for positives. I've never seen a bath go below like pH 3. You'd have, unless you're dumping nitric acid in every time. So the only way you're really going to go is up. The quick answer to making a bath more basic, like when you're doing heavy maintenance, that's when you do it, is you'd add a little bit of bicarbonate or ammonia or something like that to raise the pH up to 7. You want to neutralize that bath before you do heavy maintenance on it. But that's a whole nother question there. So I hope that helps, Jan. I hope that does something for you anyway. What else do we have? I should have brought my water out. We're dry. We have a very dry conditions up here. I mean, I think it's supposed to rain in a couple of days, but very dry up here. 16% humidity, something like that. So, and I'm gabbing and my throat's drying out. But it's nice. It's only, what is it, 21 degrees? Oh, here we go. Sorry. Let's go over. I got 2 chat boards going on. A question about issue. Yesterday, it was barely impossible to see the image during development. This is Jan. During development time, exposure was okay. Plate was pretty clear after silver bath. Just wonder why. So it was barely impossible for me to see the image during development time. Yes. So that could be. Yeah, I would check. I would check your silver content and your pH in your silver bath. Everybody's kind of experienced this before. So you pour a plate with collodion and check, it's probably not your collodion salts, it's more your bath. When you pour a plate, you know, you got your collodion, your salts in there. I don't care what recipe you use, you got at least 1 salt in there, usually 2 or 3. And you put it in your silver bath. The pH and the silver content, it's going to determine how much silver you put on that plate. So sometimes you'll pull a plate out and it's really milky. You know, it's like, oh, wow, look at that. Especially like on clear glass. It almost looks if you felt like if you turn the white light on, it'd be a white covering. And then other times it's kind of a blue thin haze and you can barely see anything. You make the exposure, you develop it. The image turns out okay, but you don't have that kind of thick. That's a deposit of silver Jean is talking about there. Exposure was okay. Plate was pretty clear after the silver bath. Just wonder why. Check your silver content and your pH. That's exactly why. And if you're working in a temperature difference too, if it's colder or hotter, you're going to see that difference too. But definitely, Jean is a silver content. I can manage development with 15 seconds, but prefer to do it visually. If you can do that, Jean is talking about visual inspection on development, not using the 15-second. If you have enough experience, you can do that, and you'll know you're within parameters. If you're underexposed and you go too long, you're going to get the veiling. If you're underexposed, if you're overexposed and it flashes up right away, you're going to get that. You're going to get the other side of the problem. But usually, I tell people stick with the 15 seconds until you get it down. Tim, how you doing, brother? The vapor pressure of ether is almost 10 times that of alcohol. Therefore, when I reconstitute my collodion, I'll add 3-to-1 ether to alcohol, not 50. Yes, and I've changed this a little bit. That's not, it's interesting to know the vapor pressure of ether is 10 times that of alcohol. But you know why I've changed from 50-50 back up? Tim is saying, hopefully you pour a plate and you use a drain bottle to drain your excess collodion off. I hope you do that. And we can talk about that if you want to, but we know why. Mostly it's for the evaporation of the ether. Ether goes away very fast. And so when you drain it off into this drain bottle, you can then reconstitute that and put it back into your pour bottle. So you don't have a variance of solvents in your collodion. So you pour your plate with your pour bottle, cap that, you dump it in your drain bottle, the excess in your drain bottle. Then when your drain bottle's full, let's say you have a 100 milliliter drain bottle just for ease. I used to say take 10 mils of ether and 10 mils of alcohol equal and put in and reconstitute that drain bottle. I've now switched over to, he does 3 to 1. That's fair. I'd say 2 to 1. So I'd do 15 ether and 5 alcohol. And why do I do that? Because every time you add alcohol, you're adding water to your collodion. Now you get in the summertime, or you get your technique off, you start getting chambered lines or the crepey lines. That's water in your alcohol, or water in your alcohol that goes in your collodion. And on top of that, you're not going to evaporate much alcohol, maybe some of the ethanol, but very little water when you're draining your plate, right? It's the ether that goes away. So you need to reconstitute your ether and leave kind of your alcohol alone. And sometimes in the past, I've just used ether, just reconstituted with ether. Just depends. Like in the summertime, and really, in fairness, this is what I was talking about. In the summertime, you can do 50-50, especially in a hot, dry area. If you're in a high desert, you'll burn that water off, right? If you're in a low, cool, humid area, I'd do 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 ether, like Tim's saying. That's a good point. There are no disadvantages, Tim. None to that.
Can I chime in here, Quinn?
Please.
Just to add to, I tend to agree with what you're saying, but just to add to that, you can get a bit more scientific, if you will, on what that mixture should be by reading the SDS. The SDS on collodion shows that on average, the majority of collodion that we're using is 70% ether, not 50-50.
Or more. Or more.
Yeah, on average, though, it's 70. If that's on a 4% collodion, if you go to a 7%, then yeah, it's certainly more.
Yep, exactly.
So I guess what I'm advocating here is folks should read their SDS, and many don't. And I think that's borderline criminal, quite frankly, in my opinion. But anyway,
I agree. Dale, if you were out here in the high desert, you would find that in the western United States, where the humidity, we can drop into the single-digit humidity, you will find that you might want to add that 50-50. And in defense of that comment, that's what I was doing in the summertime. That's mostly working outdoors. So you're right, though. The total, let's say, a collodion, just like Dale just said, is 70% plus ether, 22 to 25 alcohol, and 4 to 8% nitrocellulose. Exactly right. That would give you a good basis for that, for a starting point. So,
and your comment about the humidity factor is a good segue to the question I posted there on, and you're right, the atmospheric conditions is a massive determinant.
It is.
And with that, I'll mute out.
Yeah, no, it's great. Great comments. I appreciate it. And you get in this dry condition, you get a slight breeze going and you're pouring a plate, you'd be amazed at what happens to that stuff. It is warm, dry. Just like you said, look at your conditions, and everybody's mileage is going to vary a little bit, like I said. So Jean said, Tim, again, I just want to make sure you heard me. There are no disadvantages. That's a good methodology. 3 to 1 ether is great. 2 to 1 would be good too. You're in Colorado, high and dry, going over the summertime. You could get away with a little more than that.
Just to follow up, Quinn, I just pulled up the weather. By comparison, where I am right now, the humidity is 67%.
Woo!
And the humidex is 27. That's very standard.
Woo!
Summertime. So we're working. It's rare. I mean, rare. It's like finding chicken with teeth when you go below 50% humidity. And so you don't need any additional water in your alcohol. No. That's why even in the summertime, I carry my alcohol burner with me in the field just to preheat plates to get that humidity off. And for those that may be listening, what we tend to use for a yardstick around here is when you exhale on the plate, you want your vapor or your condensation on the plate to to evaporate or disappear in about a 3 to 4 second range. Anything longer than that, you're going to run into humidity problems with the collodion lifting off the plate, even with subbing. So the only trick I know of, quite frankly, is two, but only one works really effectively, and that's to preheat the plate to get that moisture off of it. The other one is to sub the entire plate, but the humidity still stays there. So it's preheating is about the only way to combat it that I'm aware of. So my question to you was, do you know of any other tricks that are, when it's when 30 degrees out, you just don't want to be putting more heat in with the alcohol burner in there.
Right. Yeah. The only one I've ever heard people use is the hair dryer. So I only had to deal with a little bit of humidity in Germany. I mean, it was quite humid. I had to wrestle with that a little bit, but that's where I found out the real importance of ether. What does ether do? If you pour a plate with heavy collodion, just a regular mixture of photographic collodion, you'll see that ether lift off and go down. That evaporates quickly and adheres that collodion to the plate. It's for adherence. So ether is really important in that context. That's why you want to have the ether content correct in that, and for viscosity, right? If you don't reconstitute a pour bottle, you're going to start pouring out gum. Your collodion will thicken up so much, it'll absorb a lot of stuff. You'll have big lines on your plates, all kinds of stuff. You'll see. I can almost look at plates and tell you if they were made in the winter or the summer, just from the collodion, how thick it was, the ether content, the temperature, all that. We're drilling down deep here, but the bottom line is, and Dale brings up very good points. The bottom line is reconstitute it properly with more ether than alcohol. And the SDS sheets, definitely not just on collodion, read them all. Those are really important, or MSDS sheets, however you want to call them. And then for adherence, you can't have any moisture on that plate, like you said. You will not have collodion stick at all. So Jean says pH was 4, but SG was probably wrong because, yeah. So check that. You're very welcome, Jean. And Bernd, hello. Oh, that's okay. You can watch this later. Yes, I'm in the mountains. That is true. I'm going to go back over here and see what we have. Yeah. And Dale asked about that humidity thing. No. The only thing I can say is preheating, like you said, heat burning off a dehumidifier if you can get it right. But if you're outdoors, you're not going to pack your dehumidifier around. So heat is the best way to go. But the beautiful thing about it is you can just heat that glass up. I'm sure you do. Heat that glass up. Condensation's gone. Let that cool down a bit for a second, and then pour your collodion on it. And I actually have done that, and it works. That's the only way I know how to tackle that problem, really. So, but if you do have a lot of lifting and peeling, and you're in a humid area, like Dale just said, 60, 70% humidity, pay attention to all these little details. You'll be surprised at what is the culprit. People say, oh my God, I cleaned my plate so well. I did all this properly and it's still peeling. And then you see, oh, it's 80% humidity. You're in Miami, Florida. It's 80% humidity and 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Celsius. And yeah, you're going to have some peeling issues if you're not getting that humidity off there. Yes, I liked your roses, Bernd. Those were great. Exposure looked great. White objects or bright colored objects with detail are very difficult to photograph. That's a great challenge to have in collodion, right? Trying to get, like Bogoslav said earlier, trying to get the sky with the clouds, all the UV detail in whites, detail, you have to have your exposure and your development down right. Those are great technical exercises to go through. Bernd is on the YouTube channel asking questions. I'm flipping back. Hey, Nicholas, good to see you, brother. It was really, thanks for joining in. I appreciate that. And what time? I don't even know what time it is. Anybody have anything else? If we, wow.
See you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, thank you, my brother. Merci beaucoup.
Au revoir.
So, anybody got anything else here? Man, my screen is really dark here. I can't really see much. Or not dark. The sun is coming behind me again. There's a little breeze. You ever smelled the pines in the Rocky Mountains? It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. So that was good to see Nicholas. He's a mensch. He's a good guy.
Last time I was in the Rockies, it wasn't pine I was smelling.
What was it? Bear scat?
Nope. Let's just say I was downwind of some herb.
Oh, yeah. Some cannabis. Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's mountain growers up here for sure. We have a bear right over here. It's been a black bear sighted twice in the last week right here. And right over here, we have some mountain lion as well, too. So you are on the food chain up here for sure.
And you're in the middle of those two carnivores.
Yes, we are directly in the middle of the two carnivores. That's why we only let our cat out with supervised visit. You know, we have to supervise him. He likes to run around, and I get a little worried about it. We've got these great black squirrels that crawl up and down the trees, hummingbirds, all kinds of variety of birds here. I got to research. We have these giant crows that just glide on the thermals up here around the top of the mountain. And just look, it's just amazing. It's like a show. You can sit in the living room in there and look out the window, and it's like you're watching a show. It's amazing. I just love it. It's just so peaceful and nice. But maybe someday, if this COVID thing gets over and people can travel again, and somebody wants to come out and spend some time up here, we should be set up, get my dark room and studio set up. And I can only imagine the exposures up here. It might be all F32 at a half a second or something. I don't know.
Quinn, just look over your left shoulder. Is that a dogwood tree I see back there?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay, the Wilson bunkie would look awful nice right under that, my friend.
Yes, yeah, that's another, the fauna and flora up here. You can choose to go under a ponderosa pine, a juniper, a dogwood. There's tons of different, and the cactus. We have some type of aloe plant. It's amazing. I can't believe the fauna and flora up here. Not to mention all the animals. But guess what? No mosquitoes. We're too high in elevation. I can sit out here in the evening, not a mosquito one. In my shorts. I mean, not my underwear, my short pants. And not get bit. I have no mosquito bites on me.
Thanks for qualifying that, by the way.
Yeah, I didn't want to gross people out. I don't. Although you could run around here nude, I guess, if you wanted. Nobody would say much.
TMI.
Yeah. There's a little bit of cloud going over. So, well, guys, thank you so much. I think we'll call it a day. And I'm going to try to get back on my Saturday schedule here. Just if nothing else, to just come in and chat and see what everybody's up to. And bring your questions. I have a tiny bit of break next week, or this coming week, starting Monday, the middle of the week. There's an American holiday. The 4th of July is next Saturday. But after that, I have all next week open. So I have the following week, though, I have my shipping container delivered, and then all my household goods, and then I'm going to offload those. But we're going to be here, and I'm going to have my Saturdays free for the most part, for at least a couple hours in the morning. So if you want to come in and join me, please do. I appreciate everybody coming in. Yes, it was good to see you, Dale. I'm glad you got in here. There's the top of the pines. And which way can we go here? There's a little swing we have in our front yard. Isn't that nice? Little made out of wheels of wire or something. I don't know what it is. We got a 15-gallon a minute water well up here. We've got a 500-gallon propane tank, our septic system. We're pretty much all off the grid except the little bit of juice coming in. So it's a good life, guys. Join me next week. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Kareem, Jan, Dale, Boguslav, Thilo. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And everybody on YouTube, too. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Send email questions if you have questions. Bye-bye.